to Frickety Frack, We Do Talk Back. Thank you for joining me in this episode. My name is Patrick, and I'm Frack. Frickety Frack, We Do Talk Back is a show where I discuss different aspects of fandom and how they relate to the gospel. So I'm going to be going through an episode of Invincible and connected to teachings from the Bible. The name of the show comes from my dad, who dubbed my brother and me Frick and Frack since we were kids. So we're going to be covering the first episode of season 3 of Invincible, which is entitled "You're Not Laughing Now." And so the issues of Invincible that are covered in this episode are issues 48 and 49. And so this is leading up to a lot of interesting things that will be, if they're staying as true to the source material as they have been, it's going to lead to some very interesting things after this episode. So in the beginning of this episode, we see Mark training and seeing how he's getting stronger. They give statistics on what they've done. They give examples of what he has been doing to increase his strength, speed, endurance, all that stuff. And so then by the time it comes to the ending of the training montage, in a sense, uh, we see Invincible being sent out to stop someone who has stolen the Declaration of Independence. And so it's enjoyable to watch. And he brings Rex Splode along, who kind of winds his way into being included into the fight, that kind of thing. And so it turns out that it's two martial artists named Dropkick and Fightmaster who have shown up to steal the Declaration of Independence. They don't. They seem to be from the future, and I'm trying to remember their story from the comics, but it's not coming to me yet at the moment, so I'm not going to really get into it. But anyways, um, uh, and so he Invincible fights them alongside Rex Splode, and and it just kind of shows how much more powerful he is than these martial artists. But it gives us an idea too of, in comic books, we see a lot of martial artists, well, and even ones who are slightly enhanced, like Iron Fist. And the powerhouses kind of, they respect them, like even Black Panther because of his vibranium tech, Batman with his prep time and things like that. But ultimately, it comes down to, the best martial artist wouldn't be able to take someone who can bench press the largest iceberg on the planet, lift it, and it wouldn't do anything to him. So I just really enjoyed that kind of quip and moments, really recognizing, you know, powerhouses like Invincible or even, Superman, things like, heroes like that would not be phased by non-enhanced individuals, especially if they don't do any kind of trick with tech or magic or anything like that. And so during this, we get Multipol, who attempts to kill Rex Splode because he blames him for the death of Duplicate. And so this fight, Rex gets overwhelmed because Paul is much more uh, aggressive than Duplicate is, and so he's much more driven. Rex is just trying to be like, listen, I didn't kill her, so he wasn't going all out either. Uh, but he gets overwhelmed. And so Mark goes in to save him, but when you watch the beginning of the episode, one of the comments in the recap is that, it's like, I need to learn how to control myself so I don't lose it. And so this fight, it foreshadows Mark on how quickly he can turn off his desire to control his anger. Because he's just like, you know what, me being nice is not working. And so he just goes, then he starts going all out on Multipol and ripping through his bodies. And then, Kate eventually arrives and with Immortal to tell him, like, no, I'm still alive. Stop doing this. And so he stops, but Mark sends him to jail. Uh, and so that's the start of the episode. And then we get a moment. where Mark goes to Eve after encouragement from Rick and William to tell Eve about his feelings for her. And so it's a very awkward conversation between the two of them. And I really enjoyed it because one of the things that I've seen in television and comics and all these things is that teenagers are not written like teenagers very often, and they don't have very teenagery moments. And this felt like that for me. Like flashed back to times when I was a teenager or, first in college, asking someone out and someone who I really liked that I had that kind of awkward moment because it was like, it was like this person really does mean a lot to me. And so I don't want to mess it up. And so even my wife, who at the time was my girlfriend, when I told her I loved her for the very first time, I stuttered. And it was we talk about it, we joke about it now, but like this felt very real to me. This conversation between Mark and Eve, it was just a great, wonderful, very real conversation. During this, Mark kind of messes up, and they get interrupted by Doc Seismic kidnapping all of the heroes in the states. And so Doc Seismic has gained control of underground dwelling monsters. All of these great creatures, and they're wonderfully designed. The animation is great for the monsters, and it's just and it leads to a really good fight with Adam, Eve, and Invincible trying to take out these monsters and losing, and which then the Reaniman and Darkwing 2 uh, come to help and assist. And during all of this, it leads to them overthrow or thwarting Doc Seismic's plans, and Mark being very upset about Darkwing being used, and as well as the Reaniman. But one of the things before I get to the biblical lesson, the highlight for me of the episode was Alan the alien's time in prison. In this episode, it's very brief. It's kind of a post-credit scene, and it was just hilarious. I loved the dialogue that he has with Omni Man, and then the attempt of dissection of Alan the alien, and he's like, "Oh, that did hurt." It's like, "Ah, but I did shrug it off," and it's just really great moments. And Seth Rogen was perfectly cast as Alan the alien, and he's really selling the character, and it's just really great. All right, so for the biblical theme, I chose the verse Proverbs 28, verse 13. This is what it says: "Whoever conceals his transgressions will not prosper, but he who confesses and forsakes them will obtain mercy." So I chose this Bible verse because of the secrets Cecil had been keeping, uh, and Mark struggles with the choices that Cecil makes as the head of the Global Defense Agency. The end of this episode, Mark confronts Cecil about keeping Darkwing 2 and Sinclair around. He's like, these guys need to be in prison. And during this, Cecil talks to him about Angstrom's murder, and Mark admits that this is something that he has to live with, and how it was an accident. And Cecil, like all characters that are heads of spy agencies, like Nick Fury, Amanda Waller, they work in very morally gray areas. And depending on if they're supposed to be a hero or a villain, like here, Nick Fury is a hero, Amanda Waller is usually depicted as a villain, usually kind of will lend itself to where their decisions will mostly come from. But they're usually always working for the greater good for the most part. There's some differences, but I'm not going to get into that. But I like this verse because Mark isn't fully recognizing, at least in this episode, the responsibility that he owes for his hand in Angstrom Levy's death. And Cecil's like, I could arrest you and throw you away, throw you in jail. Do you want me to do that? And he's like, that was different. And so so there's some self justification. And we live in a world where this happens a lot, where we try to justify our actions in a way to not take responsibility for them. And I see this, even in myself. Like, I know I am guilty of having done this, not the killing part, but justifying poor choices or justifying a mistake that I made, things like, and trying to brush off blame from myself, and uh, and so it's one of the things that I know I have to work at, that I have to take responsibility for my actions. And so I think us as Christians, we need to be willing to accept responsibility for actions. And yes, I believe in grace and mercy from Jesus Christ, but that Jesus never said that we wouldn't be um, also responsible from the court systems and judicial systems, or if you get fired from your job, or a relationship ends because of decisions that you make, where we have to look at it from this perspective that we do need to take the responsibility for our actions. Now, we don't have to take responsibility for actions of other people because we didn't make anyone do anything. But we have to accept responsibility for actions. I see it in the media and all around, that people aren't taking responsibility for their actions. And I think that can be something that can set Christians apart. Be like, you know what? I do accept responsibility for my actions, and show people that there is a way that we can work together, even when we disagree about things, but be willing to accept the responsibility of our actions and the consequences that come with it. And so I want to encourage you today that if there is a fight going on between you and someone else, that you take responsibility for it, and responsibility for your actions and how you respond to things. And so I want to encourage you that today. If if you're needing help figuring that out, send me an email or send me a tweet, or on Threads, or YouTube, and I'll do my best to see if I can help you out, work you through it. I mean, I am a pastor after all; it's what I do. All right, so how am I going to rate this episode? So this episode starts off with a bang. Bringing us back to Doc Seismic. He's one of the first supervillains that Invincible had fought. And it's just, it's a great callback. And so for me, I'm going to rate this episode a 4.5, because everything was great. The the character moments were fantastic. The monsters were well designed and well animated, but it seemed like the animation seemed to have been of a poorer quality than I remember of seasons one and two. Like, I really felt like seasons one and two, the animation was at a higher quality. This seemed a little bit. I don't know if they changed studios, or the studios went for a cheaper animation direction, and which that's their prerogative. Uh, but it just seemed, the character models, uh, other than the monsters, just seemed to be just not as good, and it really actually did take me out of it, seeing a lot of some of the profiles of or the facial of Adam Eve and Mark Grayson's body shape. It just, I don't know, there seemed to be a problem, and it took me out of it. And so so other than that, it can't be a perfect episode. So it's a 4.5. All right, so anyone with questions for me about the biblical lesson that I talked about this episode, or any other discussion ranging from anime, comics, or just anything in general, feel free to email me at frickityfracktalkback@gmail.com, or reach out to me on Twitter at frickityf, or at frickityfrack on Instagram, Threads, and Facebook. So please rate, review, and subscribe. Remember that I love you. Most importantly, God loves you. And let's be invincible.